Hare Krishna. My name is Anutama Das. I am ISKCON's Global Minister of Communications and also a member of the Governing Body Commission, GBC, based here in Washington, D.C., where I am today. And we're here with Sukavaha, who I'll introduce in just a moment or two, to be part of the 16 days of activism for safer communities within ISKCON. This is a series of dialogues and programs that have been put together by the Vaishnavi ministry. And today we're going to talk about trauma. I'll discuss a little bit more about the topic and the title in a moment. But first, I want to welcome Sukavaha. Sukavaha is a Karuna Care chaplain, which she'll, I think, explain a little bit more to us in a few minutes. She's also a published author. She's been a member of ISKCON since 1974, was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in New Vrindavan in 1975. So welcome, Sukavaha. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I know from our personal interactions and many topics in the past that you're someone who's very concerned about the social issues within ISKCON and strengthening our communities and our families and our individuals. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so grateful to be with you in this dialogue.
So, and I'm going to learn a lot today. I know I am, and I'm sure many people listening will also learn a lot too. So the actual topic we're working with is trauma-informed leadership in ISKCON. And before we get into hearing from you about what does it really mean, trauma, I want to just kind of set the context that we're looking not just at leadership in the sense of a temple president or a GBC representative or zonal supervisor or department head within ISKCON. Those are certainly leaders, and part of it is going to be informing those leaders. But we're really looking at the broader sense of leadership. Parents are leaders. Moms and dads are certainly leaders. Grandparents are leaders. Sunday school teachers are certainly leaders. So it's not just someone who has an official administrative position in the society, but leadership in general. People who give leadership, who have followers, who have people they take care of within the broader ISKCON society. So that's our topic for today, trauma-informed leadership in ISKCON. So maybe the best place to start is just with a definition, if you could. What is trauma? What do we mean by trauma in this context?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Interestingly enough, in the 70s, like after the Vietnam War in the United States, psychiatrists were studying the veterans that were coming back who seemed to be like a shadow of their former self. They were the same age as the psychiatrists, and they were really confused. So they were defining trauma as an unusual circumstance. And most people think of trauma as like war, natural disasters, accidents, something like big that everybody can recognize. That's trauma. And later on, they really discovered their own ignorance about the topic, and that they realized that trauma is not just these big events, but sometimes smaller events that happen repeatedly over time, or even once or twice, but that they impact, they're a situation, an event that happens that's so upsetting, and we just don't know how to deal with it. It's just too much for us to even understand what to deal with. And so we become overwhelmed, and then our body kind of can shut down. And so a lot of trauma in that regards would happen in childhood also, because children are often overwhelmed, and they're smaller, and they look up at the adults, and the adults are telling them things, and maybe they're not telling them things that are actually appropriate or correct, and they don't know what to do with it. Another thing about trauma is that it's not necessarily the event, but how it occurs to the person. So say a child gets bitten by a dog. Okay, if the child is alone and they get bitten by a dog, and then they can't find their parent or anybody to take care of them, that's then they can get traumatized. But if the parent's right there, swoops them up, says, oh, I'll take care of you, fixes it, bandages, comforts them, that doesn't necessarily turn into a trauma because they got the support they need. Now, the thing about children also is if these events are coming from caregivers, that is super confusing for a child. So studies have shown that 1 in 8 children witness physical violence between their parents. And then they're confused and overwhelmed. It's like, what do I do? I love both my parents. Why are they fighting? What am I supposed to do about this? And that's overwhelming for a child. And then a large number of children are beaten by their parents or even emotionally minimized or even neglected by their parents. And they don't know what to do with that. And they don't have anybody to talk to because the parent usually is the one that's supposed to protect you. And if they're hurting you, then what do you do with that? And that's when it gets stuck. It gets stuck and we're overwhelmed and we don't know what to do with it. And it stays there. It stays in the body. Yeah, there was.
So you said it's something that can be very upsetting, very overwhelming. Obviously, it's causing some kind of harm to us physically, or it seems you're primarily looking about emotional harm, psychological harm, something that can be carried into the future. And
There's one other category.
please.
Neglect. They did these studies of American Indians that were taken from their reservations, babies. And I don't know the circumstances around it, but they were put in a nursery full of little babies. And there were only a few nurses, and all they had time to do was give them the bottle and change their diaper. And the kids were like starving for affection. So they like would stand up in their cribs, try to get the nurse's attention, throw their bottles down, cry. And when the nurses just threw the bottle back in and just ignored them, a lot of the babies just laid down and died. So it's not just physical abuse, but neglect. A child needs love and support. And so that's another topic also.
So you mentioned child trauma several times. Are we specifically talking only about things that happened to us or others when they were, 5 or younger? Or is this something that actually can happen later stage of life? You mentioned Vietnam War. Certainly those weren't babies. So
No.
the idea you're pointing out is it can happen in various ways at various stages of life.
Yes, it can happen in various ways. Currently, there's a catastrophic event in America in Asheville, North Carolina, where my 2 daughters live. Huge flooding, catastrophic, no water for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, no electricity, no cell phones, interstate highways falling off the cliff. This is traumatic. Now, there are different levels of trauma in that experience for people in that situation. Certainly people's houses who were crashed or who lost people in the event, that's one trauma. People getting hurt, that's a trauma, but also it's a trauma to like lose your job and not have any income and not have any money. And what am I going to do? So there are so many levels of trauma, and we're all going to experience it in our life. In this world, there will be traumas.
So why is it seems like you mentioned that in the 70s, beginning in the United States, perhaps the studies began maybe in other places too, but it really became an issue here after the Vietnam War with the veterans coming back. But why is it seems like we're hearing more about trauma today than in the past? I don't remember it being a word I heard of much as a young person.
Right.
Why so much attention now? There's more traumatic events, or we're just becoming, some might say hypersensitized to it, or why now?
Well, we're definitely becoming much more aware of the effects of trauma, and definitely trauma is increasing as our society just moves faster and faster and faster. We will probably in the future see mobile phone trauma from kids being on their phones all the time.
They're already seeing that in terms of the psychological negative impact. I mean, the Surgeon General of the United States has warned about this.
Yeah, so it will increase the faster we go. There was probably less trauma when we were just living in our little farms and farming at home. The more And the more we get global information, that's also, impacting us.
So in part, the pace and the nature of modern human life,
Yeah.
whereas maybe previously you know, long time ago, you're living closer to the land, you're living more connected with your family. Your family members weren't thousands of miles away sometimes, and the only way to connect them wasn't just electronically. You saw them on a regular basis. So that in itself may be contributing to an environment that
Yeah, stress. And then if parents are stressed,
yes.
then what do? They throw their stress on their kids because they're stressed. And then that becomes generational trauma then.
So trauma was there in the past, stress was there in the past, but now because of the pace of society, it's becoming more perhaps prevalent. People are more aware of it, and something that we, as with the topic here, members of ISKCON, leaders within ISKCON, need to be informed about it.
Yeah.
Is it something that we talked about how it impacts people of all ages? Is it something that affects women more than men, or men in different ways than women? Is there any data research on that?
Well, it affects everyone. Women may be more verbal than men, which generally are. I think some of the trauma that men experience as a young child is that they're shamed and they're told, don't cry, don't be a baby, hold it in. So men tend to hold their stress inside, which has an impact on their body. So they may hold their trauma inside.
And oftentimes they explode in anger. I know they, in some other
Yes.
areas, they talk about with men, it's very hard for them to name their emotions. You say, what are you feeling now? I'm angry. But that's kind of a cover for what's happening underneath, which could be,
Right.
I'm embarrassed, or I'm frustrated, or I'm something like that. I've been let down, but
Yes.
leads me
All of that.
to respond in anger way. So that
Absolutely.
maybe that lack of being aware of what's going on inside, a little stronger for men than women in itself,
Yes.
becomes a source of trauma.
Yes. And so that then it would be expressed differently. Women may be more verbal about it, maybe getting more upset. And then men may turn to different things, alcohol, drugs, addictions, porn. They could turn to that. That could be one of the consequences of
We
trauma.
hear about, like, say, with young women, oftentimes like cutting in terms of
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
response to trauma in their lives, and that young men will go out and smash the car against the wall, and in general, I mean,
Yeah.
extreme,
Yeah. 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 No,
whereas a
men.
woman would actually physically harm herself, but it's a response to the same type of stress and
Yes.
trauma and
Boys do
unhappiness.
that too. Cutting for teenagers now is a much more, it's like it relieves the pain actually. Like the pain is so much, it's like it feels better to feel this pain than all the pain.
Oh, Krishna.
Yeah. Hi, Krishna.
Trauma, it's a very difficult thing.
Yeah.
So, maybe a little bit, yeah, I think you maybe touched on this some, but some other thoughts, and then we'll move on a little bit about why we need to be informed. But how is it that some people, some events will traumatize? Two people may go through the same event, same experience. One becomes severely traumatized by that, impacted, hurt by it, harmed by it, internalizes it, carries it with them for the longest time, whereas someone else maybe doesn't have so much of an effect upon them. Why is that?
Well, I think there would be two main reasons. First of all, depending on the event and what happens after the event. Say two people have the same event, and one person then has a parent that they can go to, they can talk to, they can say, hey, this happened to me, and talk about it and process it. And another person has nobody to talk to, and it just stays in them and they don't know what to do with it. That's one thing. Another thing could be the personality of the person. Some people are a little bit more, well, and even disassociation is a symptom of trauma, but they'll just like sometimes during a traumatic event, somebody could just disassociate from it and just like not be in their body. So it may seem that they can deal with it, but some people are really sensitive and they like feel all the energy of the trauma. They get overwhelmed way faster than someone who maybe is tougher or has somebody to talk to.
which is interesting because as devotees, we know it's so much emphasized, although we don't always careful to put it in practice about the need to reveal one's mind in confidence and to inquire confidentially. And they talk about that a lot in terms of kind of secular discussions about trauma and other psychological issues, emotional issues, the need to have a friend, to be
Yeah.
able to reveal our mind to a
Yeah.
friend. And certainly, I mean, I've seen in my own life, I mean, I'm older now and I've been through a few ups and downs and have friends that have been through ups and downs that it seems it's of immeasurable benefit just to have someone to call, not to necessarily get a solution, not to have them tell you, well, here's the answer to your problem, or to quote verses on how you should just not let it bother you, but
Right.
just to be able to, like you use the word process, just to be able to talk about it and
Yes.
have someone who cares about you say, that sounds really tough, and I'm with you, and I'm praying for you, and I know you're going to pull through it, and and other things that can be appropriate to that, but that relationship, that
Yes.
confidentiality, and to know that I can speak openly,
Yes.
and I think you're going to talk more later about being shamed, but
Yeah.
I can talk openly, and it's not going to be in social media tomorrow.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Because if I talk to somebody and share something and then it's like all over, it's like now I've been re-traumatized and I've been like embarrassed, and now it's like worsens the whole situation. So confidentiality and a safe space to process something, that's so important. And that's something that all of us, parents, teachers, leaders, confidentiality is, that word is so important and to emulate. Yeah.
Of course, and just to put the balance or almost a disclaimer out there, parents, Sunday school teachers, temple president, whatever, if someone comes to us with a very serious problem where they are either thinking of harming themselves or harming others, it's our
Yes.
responsibility. At
Yes.
that point, their confidentiality is not an issue. It's
Yes.
the person's safety, other
Yes.
people's safety, and
Yes.
as
Yes.
necessary, approach social
Yes.
services, if it's
Yes.
severe, the
Yes.
police,
Yes.
etc. So just to
Yes.
put that out there, but in
Thank
general,
you very much.
99.9% of the time, confidentiality is something that really helps enhances the healing of people. So,
Thank you for bringing that up, because
yes,
that's important. Mandated reporters, leaders
yes,
are mandated
yes,
reporters. Yeah.
yes, yes, and there's more and more of those horrible events these days. So tell me a little bit more then about looking at this broader concept of leadership. Why? Okay, we understand a little more about, what is trauma, what are the sources of it, how it's been studied historically. Why do we need to be trauma informed? I mean, we're Hare Krishna devotees, and we worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's our best friend. Where some of us, or all of us, maybe we're hoping this is our last lifetime, and whatever pain I go through, it's just my karma. More importantly, it's just your karma. Whatever you're going through, it's not my problem. It's your karma. And I'm just giving an example of, kind of dramatizing how we may think. Um, but why then do we need to be informed about trauma as leaders and
Yeah.
adults within the Krishna movement?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big reasons is to prevent more trauma, to see maybe how would I be perpetuating trauma? Is there something I'm doing that could be perpetuating it? And to be better equipped to then deal with it when I see it, to be able to recognize it. If I can't recognize trauma, I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. Then I will be, throwing shlokas at it. But to be able to recognize it, understand it, and then prevent more trauma, to prevent the trauma of, yeah, putting things under the rug, So that's one of the reasons. Also to understand what the effects of trauma are, so that we can detect it. Like, trauma affects the brain, especially in a child, the way a child's brain develop. develops is affected by trauma. It affects the nervous system and it gets stuck in the body. And if it's not dealt with, it causes disease, a lot of disease. So to understand that. Another reason is to understand like maybe are we a magnet for traumatized people because we have this wonderful, wonderful society and Krishna consciousness is the answer to all your problems. And we put this out there to everybody to convince them to take to Krishna consciousness. And now they want their problems to end quickly. So I want to come and I want to join and I want to move into the temple. And we haven't, really understood their desperation. Maybe we have a need for manpower and we may be desperate for manpower. And then we invite people in. And are we ready to take care of them? I mean, taking care of people takes time. Taking care of a child takes time. And the people who come into our temples are,
Products of the modern society.
Yeah, and we need to take care of them. So just being aware of like all the implications of trauma and how it creates addictions, like I said earlier, addictions to drugs, alcohol, porn. And then just think about it too. We're in a society where, okay, no intoxication, right? But if you're
within ISKCON, you're talking about ISKCON rules now.
Yeah, ISKCON rules, no intoxication. But like the reason people take intoxication is because they're in so much pain. Trauma is very painful. It's like you were talking about cutting. The cut is less painful than the pain that's felt in the mind and the body and all that confusion.
Are you saying intoxication and other addictive behaviors are a similar thing?
It numbs the pain.
It numbs the pain. So while the behavior itself is hurtful, at least temporarily, it's either the distraction or numbing or something like that.
It's a great number. And that's why so many people are addicted. There's so much trauma.
So in Krishna consciousness, we're kind of, trying to understand that our whole existence is kind of numbing ourselves, materialistic life, as we say, we're numbing ourselves, we're avoiding the problem. If you don't feel good, go to a movie, go to happy hour after work.
Right.
You're stressed out,
Yeah.
Whatever people, and then it can become very hurtful and addictive behaviors,
Yes.
Happy hour which is problematic in itself, but can turn into an addiction, etc.
Yeah. There is a legal addiction in ISKCON. You know what that is?
Please.
Prasadam.
Yeah, but we can't call that addiction because it doesn't have
It could become one. There are eating disorders.
Eating disorders.
Yeah, there are eating disorders, and that's another way that we can numb the pain. So, and then of course, then you're in
even good things, if taken to an excess,
yes,
can be harmful.
Yes. And then you've got the rule, no sex except in marriage, and that can be very challenging for people. And so then, the easiest way to deal with that and get away with it, just like look in your computer, look at a porn site. Studies have shown that there's so much, it's called the new drug. Porn is called the new drug. There's so many hits on the porn, I don't know what you call them.
Sites, websites.
Yeah, porn sites. It's a phenomenal number, more than the number of hits on Amazon.com.
On Amazon. And we have an idea how much Amazon is all present. I mean, my wife and I had a retail business that was ultimately ruined because of Amazon, because people don't shop in stores as much as they did. They just go online. Exactly. And you drive down the highway. I travel a lot. There's Amazon Prime trucks everywhere. So I can imagine how many people, so even more people are looking at porn. And the thing I think that sometimes just a side effect of that, just to speak about briefly, we get back to our main topic, is it pollutes the mind in the way you look at other people. It
Absolutely.
really objectifies, women
Yes,
become only an object of my sensual gratification.
yes.
And
Yeah, and
the whole,
that's another abuse, which becomes trauma. And
yeah.
then, and then of course it says in Bhagavad Gita, what you contemplate usually ends up happening. So if you're just thinking, oh, it's not a big deal, I'm just looking on the computer, but then it can bleed out into the bigger society, and then there can be sexual abuse. And we've dealt with that a lot in the United States within ISKCON. So it's not that it doesn't happen. It does happen. So we need to be informed.
It's your earlier comment reminds me. I recently heard an interview with the minister of one of the larger Christian denominations, and he was saying that people sometimes have the idea that when you come to a religious community, say ISKCON, um, it's a house full of saints, or it's people that are coming because they're so serious about looking for God, trying to love God. They've exhausted, right? Is it a Kinshana Gotra? They've exhausted all of the material avenues and they're just ready to surrender to Krishna. But what I'm hearing you say is one of the reasons that we need to be trauma informed is because people come, as this minister was saying, just to finish his thought, he was saying that within the church, and we can say within ISKCON, we have some of the best of humanity and perhaps some of the worst. We have people that are saints and we have people that are, the opposite. And we're all struggling with different things. And we shouldn't assume that every devotee, even every person in a leadership role, is free from their own struggles and doesn't have issues and baggage that they're carrying with them, and they're trying to work through the process of bhakti. But also, I'm understanding we talk about that more in a few minutes, perhaps. We need additional things, just like I can remember as a new devotee, we had some people in the communities where I was involved that had very serious psychological issues. Perhaps today we would say trauma. I didn't get a chance to explore much with them what the details of the people I'm thinking about. But there was a sense that we'll just chant Hare Krishna and everything will go away.
Right.
Um, which is in the ultimate sense, it's true, but it's just like if I come to you and say, I need to take some time to get an oil change in my car today. It's been 5,000 miles. If Sukavaha, you said, well, Anuttama, just chant Hare Krishna, your car will take care of itself. If I was to follow that very good spiritual instruction from the highest point, just chant Hare Krishna, but the practical implication of that would be disastrous. I would lose my car
Yes.
very quickly. I was
Yes.
thinking just the other day, I was speaking with a group of devotees. If I'm on my way, let's say I have some serious health issue and I'm getting that taken care of, I'm going to the doctor's office for some type of surgery or something like that. The fact that I need that serious help, which you could say is like getting pure and becoming free from material desires, I'm going for my surgery. That doesn't mean I don't eat that day because I'm looking after this more serious problem. It doesn't mean I don't take a bath. It doesn't mean I don't, use the lavatory, the restroom facilities. It doesn't mean I don't brush my teeth. It doesn't mean I don't lock the door because I'm focused on surgery today, so I don't do anything else. So in the same way, we should be focused on awakening our love for Krishna. That's the big goal. That doesn't mean we ignore everything else in this context. Understanding trauma, dealing with trauma, learning how to help each other through these, you, from a spiritual sense, lesser issues, but they're still issues. Same way,
Yeah.
compared to surgery, brushing my teeth is not a big deal. Taking a bath is not a big deal. Eating, but I still need to do those things too. I still need to lock the door on the way out. I
Yes.
still need to tend to all those other. I still need to park my car in a
Yeah.
parking spot and not just drive up
And
on the
lock it.
sidewalk. Yeah, yeah. I can't just drive up the sidewalk at the hospital and say, "Well, I'm here for surgery, so I don't care about anything else like parking my car." That would be quite insane, actually.
Yeah. Well, now that you brought up this point, I just remember Prabhupada once said, we're all more or less crazy, right? And
Yeah.
and and in the early days, a lot of people that had mental issues did come, especially to New Vrindavan. That's where everybody sent them.
Mm.
But also being with people who have mental disturbances, that can cause trouble for other people. because then, like, how do you deal with this person? And am I taking like so much time to deal with this person and I'm not even trained to deal with them? Is there a way that I can help them by sending them to a place which is more appropriately designed to take care of them? Our temples are not 12-step places. We're not, hospitals for people who have, all these diseases. We're here to help people and educate people spiritually. And we need to be able to refer people to appropriate places that will help them with these other issues.
And more, I know here on the East Coast, I mean, there are 12-step programs connected with Christian temples, just like for years, you see at the local church or synagogue, there's a group that meets on Wednesday night and they're helping overcome drug addiction or alcohol addiction. So it's not directly the mission of that church, but it certainly comes into part of the plan.
Yes.
So the same way with the ISKCON, I think that's an example of how we're learning to understand it. We
Yes.
also have addictive challenges. We have trauma from things that
Yes.
we've experienced in the past, and we can we can address those within a community of devotees by using appropriate technologies, to use the word Bhakti Tirthamaj like to use a lot, use appropriate technologies that are in line with the Krishna philosophy, but
Yes.
they are, in one sense, they're part of practicing bhakti, but it's taking benefit from knowledge and expertise from all kinds of sources. Just like we take knowledge and expertise from the man that changes your oil, or who fixes your plumbing, or replaces your hot water heater,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
prescribes a medicine if you got the flu in a
Yeah.
similar.
We all take wisdom from the computer technology. That's a science, the science of computer technology. Why can't we take information from, psychology? Because that it actually is the study of the mind, which if we need to manage the mind, we might want to study it and understand it a little bit.
So we should understand what trauma is, because
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of recap some of the points you made, people that come to our temples may, to one degree or the other, they're traumatized by certain things. They're kind of bringing it with them. We want to make sure that we don't perpetuate it or cause it. We need to understand the effects of it. We need to understand it actually can cause disease. Understand that in a serious way can actually cause addiction. So in part, we need to kind of be so we can look out for these things as a parent or as a temple president, so we don't make it worse, and that maybe we can, by our own behaviors, we'll maybe talk about a little bit later, things that we can do to minimize it, and also to make sure that we don't be the cause of these things ourselves.
Yeah, and also another thing which is kind of, maybe we might not be able to like even admit, but like, how am I traumatized? Like, what are my traumas? Because if I don't understand mine, it's like, what's your problem?
Why would we want to go there? Why would we want to do that?
Well, like, there are a lot of traumas that we experience, and we discussed this before. Like Prabhupada said, birth, death, old age, and disease. Those are all traumas. Birth, death, old age, and disease. Going through being in the womb is traumatic, right? We're bitten by worms. We're freaking out. We're praying to Krishna. Okay, I'm going to get it together this time. This is intense. I can't handle this, right? And then we come out through the birth canal. It's so traumatic that we forget everything. That's an effect of trauma. You just forget.
Described in the Bhagavatam that's the actual experience we all have.
Yeah, and so that's why, you know, psychologists have said that when a baby comes out, the most important thing is for the baby to feel the mother, skin to skin, get nursed, get comforted, get cared for. It needs to immediately feel, okay, I got you, you're safe. That can help to minimize the trauma of going through the birth canal. Now, of course, disease is traumatic. The pandemic, traumatic. People died. People have long COVID for over, long time. It's
or members of their family that
yeah,
unexpectedly died.
unexpectedly, not even just
I remember there was one very, very wealthy person. I think he was somewhere in South America. perhaps a billionaire. And in the very early days of COVID, when they didn't know how to treat it, and he died.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a quote from his daughter, I believe, who said something to the effect of, "My father was a billionaire. He could buy anything he wanted, except he could not buy the next breath."
Yeah. Traumatic. And then the trauma that he left behind for everybody, the business, his family, all of that, the after effects of the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, old age. I'm starting to understand the trauma of old age because, we lose a little bit sometimes of our identity. Like, I used to be able to do this, I used to be able to do that, and now I can't do that. So it's traumatic. There are studies all about old age, and then, and how to deal with old age and age gracefully, because it can be overwhelming. Like, now
So
what do I do?
we need to understand how trauma works. We need to understand that it impacts other people. Um, in part, it seems we shouldn't assume whatever Vishnu or Mary or is just angry, but there likely is, or there is something underlying there. And depending on the severity of it, maybe
Yes.
they need additional help. But at the very least, we should understand that so that we're not perpetuating it or causing it. Share a little bit, if you will. You hear a lot these days, he triggered me, she
Mm-hmm.
triggered me. What's
Yeah.
the connection between, quote, triggers and trauma?
Very good question. Great question. So, like I said, trauma stored in the nervous system and in the brain. And it's a situation where we felt really threatened and we didn't know how to overcome that threat. And so it was overwhelming for us. So in the threat response, the threat is the
So
body,
trauma means we felt threatened in whatever some situation.
some way,
We
shape, or
learned
form,
we felt
threatened,
threatened.
overwhelmed, confused. Yeah, there was a
Whether it's
threat.
a bomb falling or a dog barking
Or
or
our parents fighting, and that's threatening too. What happens if they hurt each other? Then I have no parents. I have, all that. So Krishna so kindly gave us automatic defense mechanisms. Otherwise, we wouldn't know how to protect ourselves. So those defense mechanisms are fight, flight, freeze, and then there's another one, but I won't get into that. So fight, flight, freeze. So if we can't fight our way out of a trauma, say someone is hurting me or sexually abusing me, if they're bigger than me, I can't fight my way out of it, and I can't run away because they're bigger than me. Maybe they're on top of me. I'm stuck. Trauma is feeling stuck. So then what happens a lot of times, the freeze response, children are known to like just freeze and they actually leave their body. It's called disassociation in psychology, but in our tradition, we would call it, they leave the body because it's too overwhelming, too painful. They have to go unconscious. And the only way they can go unconscious is to leave the body. These are protective mechanisms, just like if we have an accident and it's so traumatic, we go unconscious. That's a protective mechanism so that all of our systems don't blow out at the same time. So the response to trauma is these defense mechanisms because it occurs like a threat to the person. That gets stored in the body and the brain. Now, trigger is when, okay, so I'm going to use the example of sexual abuse because it's potent. So say a woman was sexually abused and a man had a certain cologne on, or he had a certain tone of voice, or he looked in a certain way. So that gets stored in the brain. Okay, yeah. And then if the woman would smell a cologne like that, just smelling the cologne, her body would say, "Oh, danger, 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 danger," and she would get triggered. Or if somebody yells and you can't handle the yelling, your parents were always yelling, I just need to get away from this yelling, and someone's yelling, especially an authority is yelling, it's just like it could be overwhelming for a person, again, depending how sensitive they are or how, and so then what it's called is it's called the amygdala hijack. The amygdala is the fight, flight, and freeze. And then we have this prefrontal cortex, which is the cognitive, logical brain, right? So usually we, something happens and, okay, we think about it and then we react or respond. But when you're triggered, the frontal cortex is cut off. It goes right from you did it and it goes right to the fight flight reaction. There's no frontal cortex involved. It's taken offline. That's being triggered. Is that helpful?
Yeah, very helpful. So, and again, in terms of trauma-informed leadership, it would mean being at the least sensitive that I may be interacting with my child or someone else's child as I'm a teacher or a member in our congregation who's coming and doing service, who seems to react in an inordinate way, according to my perception,
Yes.
um, to some event or cologne or
Yes.
the tone of a
Yes.
voice or having them sit in a certain chair in the corner of the room, and they identify that with the teacher that beat them when they were a student, or
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
in part it's really asking us to be, you've said this word a few times, be more sensitive and aware that what we see in the service is not just Vishnu or John being ridiculously upset over something we see as small. I use the word ridiculous because that may be our perception of it, but that we don't know what's going on inside or behind the scenes of that person's previous experiences.
Yeah, we have no idea. And sometimes they don't even know because it's unconscious. It's an unconscious protective mechanism. They don't know that a certain cologne affects them. Sometimes children who have been abused, they don't even remember what happened because they left their body. They don't remember what happened, but something, some touch or some voice or even some person may feel creepy to them and they don't know why that is. But it's because their body's getting a sense that it reminds me of that situation that I can't even remember.
So before we talk about what could be done or how to
Uh-huh.
respond and all that, as leaders, let's go back as you talked a few minutes about need to be more in tune with our own trauma.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about, I mean, I know you do a lot of work with Kruna Care. This is not an advertisement for more customers for Kruna Care or more clients for Kruna Care. And certainly there may be, devotees and others listening to this that really do need to get professional help. And again, we're
Yeah.
not experts on that. We're not psychiatrists. We're not
Yeah.
psychologists. You do a lot of
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah.
I counsel some devotees, but looking in terms of ourselves being trauma informed. I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean in part being more aware that I may, let's say, something seems to really upset me. Maybe I don't have to go through the whole analysis. Well, when I was 4 years old, my mother did this and this and this. Although I can see it in my own life, I can see there's certain things that may happen.
Yeah.
I can consciously remember something happened as a child that I was very uncomfortable with, and it seems to still affect the way I respond to things today
Yeah.
as an adult.
Yes, for sure, for sure, for sure. And just being able to understand our field of activities, by the way, the field of activities is not just out here, it's our own body and our own mind and especially our subtle body, which we can't see. So then we just try to tend to ignore it.
Which
But
in
it's
modern sciences that they talk about the mind and trying to
yes,
understand the mind. The
yes,
therapists are trying to deal with the mind, and psychiatrists are trying to understand the chemical imbalances of the mind.
yeah, yeah,
We have our own paradigm of understanding, explaining that, which is, as you said, the subtle body.
yeah,
It's in our tradition. It's not something
yeah.
that we don't recognize.
Yeah, and it's there. And it actually, because it's invisible, it affects us a lot because we don't see it. So say on your phone, why is my battery going down? Why can't my, there's apps running in the background, which are draining the battery, right? But your phone tells you there's apps in the background. But we have apps running in the background in our own body, subtle apps, and they're draining our energy. And they're also like affecting the way we can maneuver and manage our life and manage our relationships, and we may get triggered. Now when we can recognize, oh, I'm getting triggered, then we can do something about it. But if we don't recognize I'm getting triggered and I say, you're so mean, you're rude, you're not being respectful, you're hurting me, we're not, I might be hurting you back, and we're not really dealing with the real issue. So I remember an instance in my life. I was at some board meeting, and I got worked up, which I do sometimes. And the person who was in the board meeting with me said, boy, your ego was really, your ego was really coming out there.
Hmm.
And I just thought about it. I was like, well, what was going on there? What was going on there? What was happening? And I recognized it was a situation where I felt that people weren't listening to me. They weren't hearing what I had to say. And I was trying to make a point and I was being dismissed. Another one happened when I was getting, I had to go
So
first.
are you saying, just to pause on that one, so are you saying that because everyone gets dismissed, to use that term, all the time? I mean, it certainly happens in my life.
Oh,
So
yeah.
is that I mean, make the connection between that and trauma.
Well, because, okay. So, yeah, my trauma. So when I was 5, I had my tonsils taken out. I didn't even remember this instance, except that I had my tonsils out. Not until I was 48 did I recognize the trauma in that. So the nurse came in and said, who wants to go first? And I said, not me, not me. And then she said, whoever goes first gets ice cream. I said much louder, not me, not me. And who did they take first? They took me first. And did they give me ice cream? No, they
Oh,
gave me
no.
Jello
Oh,
because I had an
no.
infection. That was traumatic for my system. My system was, I told you I didn't want to go first, and you took me first. That was,
So that seems, just to explore this a little bit. I mean, that seems, I mean, in one sense, for a child, that's a big deal.
yeah, your parents aren't there.
Okay. Because, somebody may think, well, hey, okay, your tonsils and, so many more serious things happen to people. And it seems there's can be a tendency to dismiss my trauma is important and justifies my feeling. I may be conscious of it or not, but whatever, my past life, you don't know what I've gone through. You have no right to criticize that I get upset or I'm angry. I don't like this type of person or whatever. But whatever upsets you is not really that important. Just get over it, right? That's something we hear these days, get over it. But that doesn't seem the best way to respond.
So, me being trauma informed, me understanding my own trauma, and me understanding what I made that mean and how I had trust issues and where it came from. So then that was like, okay. So then I learned that I had this story in my head that nobody listens to me. And then, interestingly enough, I later on, because I didn't realize this instance until I was 48, I later on realized how, because I felt like they didn't listen to me and no one's going to listen to me, I tried to make people listen. I tried to make my mom listen. Mom, my homework, look, you're not listening. I jumped up and down. I tried to make my friends listen. I tried to be right all the time. When I became a devotee, oh, now I have the absolute truth. Now you have to listen to me. And by the time I'm in my 40s, I get a t-shirt that says, I'm not a nag, I'm just verbally repetitive. So not only was I was verbally repetitive because I wanted people to listen. Now, when you push your ideas and you're trying to make people listen, guess what they do?
They back away, of course. Of
Get
course.
away from me. See,
Which is,
it's true. Nobody listens to me. So I
yeah,
actually was perpetuating that trauma again and again. So that's why we want to be trauma informed, because we will perpetuate our own traumas because we haven't completed them. We haven't healed them. But
and just to put in the perspective of devotees, I mean, somebody may think, oh, this is all mundane, just general. But like, no, these are the things that association with devotees is critically important. Lord Chaitanya said the most important thing to make advancement in Krishna consciousness. So if I have some certain blocks from previous trauma, I can't understand, why can't I get close to people, or
right.
why am I so unable to take feedback from people.
Right.
That's a major block. When you work in a community, like you mentioned on a board, if you're a parent and you know something your child does really upsets you, and you know it could be harming your relationship with them, it's kind of part of our responsibility to do a little internal work on that. Again, it's not the goal. We can do all the internal work we want. We can go all the way to Brahma Loka and have like the most
Yeah.
environment in existence.
Yeah.
We still will not be happy. We still need to
Right.
become Krishna conscious. But
Right.
on the path of becoming Krishna conscious, I still have to change the oil in my car. I
Yeah.
still have to like cook dinner, and I
Yeah.
still have to clean the kitchen and
Yeah.
do laundry. These I have to do, you know, I still have to, if I hurt my arm, I got to go to the doctor. If I've got
Yeah.
trauma, it's yet again another thing about this world I should learn about because it affects me and affects my relationships with others.
Yes. Yes.
Back to our topic, if I'm a leader, especially in this fast-paced, crazy, you know, burned out and burning out world, another set of factors I really need to be aware of for myself and aware of about others in order
Hmm.
to be a good leader, in order to be a
Yeah.
Sunday school
Yeah.
teacher, to be a parent, in order to be a temple
Yeah.
president, talked
Yeah.
about. I need to have trauma informed leadership. I need to understand what is trauma, where it's coming from.
And
So maybe
when I understand my own trauma,
and understand my own trauma.
when I understand it, I
Okay, well
can
then I
do
understand.
something about it. And
Mhm,
when I do something about it, I don't get triggered as much.
mhm,
It's not that I'll never get triggered. And I don't throw my trauma on other people. You're not listening to me. You're so mean, da 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 da, and shaming them. And
mhm.
yeah, yeah. And I don't suppress my trauma and then, get, have it burst out in anger.
Okay, so you've talked about, you just did, you kind of summarized how knowing about my own trauma, I can be more, well, I mean, we're supposed to be Goswamis, right? Whatever ashram we're in, which simply defined means control of the senses. And it's
Right,
described the six pushings, right? One of them
right,
is anger and the
right.
inability to control the tongue. So if maybe I'm having trouble controlling my tongue, I need to understand what's the root cause of that. If I've got some issues with anger, I can chant to purify myself. And perhaps part of that purification is learning what trauma is that I'm suffering from or that I suffered from that's affecting the way I do things today. Um,
Yeah. It's
and it
so,
really does. I mean, even you think of things like, hey, let's go swimming. Three people jump in the pool, and two people say, no, no, no. I remember when I was a kid, they threw me in the pool and the water was cold. I don't do cold water. It's like, and we just think, oh, okay, ha ha ha. But that, in a sense, that's an example of
yeah,
how a traumatic event, even somewhat small
yeah,
relative, some of
yeah,
these, it can how events in the past can really affect us. So
yeah.
then,
I
okay, I'm a leader in ISKCON, you're a leader. The people listening here are leaders. How do we, taking this knowledge? Okay, what do we do with this? We talked about a little bit what do we do with ourselves. How do we deal with others?
Well, I just want to add that
Please.
understanding ourselves really helps us in our Krishna consciousness because we can get stuck at certain places and we're doing all the right things and then we're stuck. I mean, that happened to me. I had been a devotee for 27 years. I did everything my authorities told me. I lived in the temple. I put my kids in the ashram. I went out and collected money. I did all the right things. Why 27 years later did all this anger come up? And I'm like, wait a minute, I should be a pure devotee by now. What happened? So we don't want to get sideswiped because we didn't pay attention to the early warning signals,
Mm.
and generally a lot of times we don't pay attention to the early warning signals. So this can really help us with our Krishna consciousness because we do get stuck sometimes. And then we think, oh my gosh, I've been a devotee for 20 years. I can't tell anybody I'm stuck because I should be pure by now. Or they're going to look, they're going to think, what's wrong with you? How can how can you be stuck? You
Well,
know
even
everything.
then stuck. Um, remember the example I used to hear often, um, as a new devotee, especially, if you go to clean your house, when you first look at it, it doesn't look so bad.
Right,
When you pull the couch out from the wall, when you lift up the rugs, when you start moving things around and you realize, whoa, there's all kinds of dirt back in the corner that
right,
I didn't know was there.
right. And then you
So,
open the closet and everything you
yeah,
stuffed in there falls out.
part part of cleaning the house is to have to recognize, take a little inventory about where the dirt is, where the mess is. So in
Right.
terms, it's not necessarily that as these things become aware of them as devotees, that it means we're stuck. It could just mean we're going deeper in the process
Yes,
of cleaning
yes,
our hearts.
yes, absolutely. And we want to get all the nooks and crannies, right? The Gundicha temple. They cleaned it and they cleaned it again and they cleaned it again. It's an example. We need to keep cleaning, keep pulling the weeds. When you're a gardener, you pull the weeds and then you don't ignore it for the next 10 years. You have to continue. Oh, another weed came up. Oh, another weed came up. So we need to pay attention individually. And as we take care of our individual Krishna consciousness, that helps us to be able to be there for others. We're not throwing our stuff on others.
So being there for others
Mm-hmm.
who are traumatized,
Okay.
people carry different degrees of
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah.
Some people may have processed a lot of the trauma that they've dealt with. Some people, by our karma, we may suffer more traumatic events. There's no question
Yes.
about it. You mentioned those Native American children.
Yeah.
First Nation for Canadians would use a different description of
Yes. 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 Yes.
that people. And so certainly that's quite severe.
Right.
Other people, the lesser degrees, and as you mentioned earlier, we may respond to it differently. So what I may consider relatively light traumatic event that you went through could have been very, very difficult. So it's not my position to judge. That's important
Right.
to make.
Right.
But we all are bringing some degree of trauma, and some people that we interact with as leaders may carry more.
Yes.
How do we so we're becoming trauma informed. So now that we're informed, are we supposed to do anything differently?
Well, yeah, there's some things that we can do also, how to deal with it. The first really simple thing that we could do is to change our thinking from what is wrong with you to, oh my gosh, what happened to you? And you can even hear in the tone of voice, like what is wrong with you is already shaming you, which is like, oh my God, I'm a mess. It's like, oh my gosh, what happened? Which is
Shaming,
like,
judging, putting you in
yeah,
a
yeah,
corner.
yeah. And then the what happened to you is like opening the heart. It's like compassion, like what happened to you? And that's an important part of healing. So at least giving a person a space, what happened? And then when someone describes what
So
happened, or
is
they're,
this in our mind, Sukavaha, or is this in
well,
terms of directly
it's going to be an
verbalizing?
attitude that needs to be cultivated.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
not like I can just change my mind that I'm never going to judge people. I'm going to have to practice that because the mind does like to judge. But
So
when
it's
I,
an attitude, and then it may come out in certain situations when we're dealing with other
yeah,
people.
yeah,
Your child comes home upset about something, or
yeah,
you've got a
yeah,
devotee in your community that has upset about something. So rather than saying what's wrong with you, look at the way you yelled at them. There was no need to do that. What's wrong with you?
yes,
What happened to you?
yeah,
And then
yeah,
it's like, well,
yeah.
opens the door. Okay,
It
that's
opens the door
important.
for them to speak. And then when they're speaking, listening and validating another person's experience. This is a big thing for even the child abuse department, you know, the office. You want to validate the child's experience because the abuser says, no one's going to believe you. No one's going to listen to you. And even your parents might not even believe you. No, that was your uncle. Your uncle would never do that. Your uncle's a good guy. No, he hurt me.
Or
So
Pastor so and so, or
yeah,
Brahmin
pastor
so and
so and
so.
so. Yeah.
No
It
way
and
that Brahmachari could hurt you. That's impossible.
Yeah. And that's so scary. So, like, that's an extreme example, but, validating another person's experience, that might not be my experience. And I may never have that experience, but validating and hearing another person's experience and validating it,
So validating means hearing. What do you
it
unpack
means
that a bit?
hearing and really being able to acknowledge that Yes, that's how it was for you. That was awful.
So no judgment.
Yeah,
I
no
mean,
judgment. Like, you shouldn't be upset about that. You
yeah.
know, you shouldn't be upset about, what's your problem? That's just like the little thing. Why are you upset? That's invalidating. That's minimizing.
So let me ask. Sometimes, I mean, again, look at the structure of ISKCON. Sometimes, I got a full. I'm the president of a community or some important role. I'm married. I've got a husband or a wife, and I've got kids, and I've got to clean the house, and I've got to cook dinner. I've got to pacify the boss. And I got an hour at the temple, and it's a lot easier, consciously or unconsciously, for me to just kind of have this attitude of, I need the people that can pick up and carry a load around here, and I don't have as much time. It'd be nice if I had the luxury of spending a lot of time with you, but I don't. How
Yes.
do you, that
Well,
seems
even
like
if you said that, even if you said that one thing, I'd like to spend time with you. I don't have enough time to spend time with you. Let's see if we can find some resources for you. Can we
mm,
get you a support group?
mm,
Do you need, what resources can we get you that you get the care that you need, even if I'm not personally able to do it for you, which, the temple president's not going to be able to do it for every single member of the temple. But at least if he says, and even if he says I'm not equipped or I don't have the time, not that
mm.
I don't have the time for you, not that I don't want to, but I at this point I don't have the wherewithal. I'm in the middle of a big thing doing this thing. How can we get you the support you need? How can we get you what you need? Just even offering that would say, oh, at least he cares about me, or he or she, I should say, not just he, but yeah, at least they care and they're thinking about me and they're wanting me to get the support, even if they personally can't give it to me.
Which may be from the other side of the coin, also helpful to recognize that thinking or being a leader in ISKCON doesn't mean you are expected to have the tools or the knowledge or the expertise to deal with some of these issues, but part of it
Exactly.
is knowing what resources are available. You
Yes.
know, Karuna Care,
Yes. Yes.
there's therapists out there, and
Yes. Yes.
a lot of people, go to therapists these days, and maybe you don't need a therapist. Speaking to a personal leadership role, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But we shouldn't think that's not necessary. Maybe
Yeah.
someone that rides a bike doesn't need to get an oil change, but if you drive a
Right.
car, you need an oil change.
Yeah, and there are lots of simple modalities for dealing with trauma, even in a moment. Even if someone comes in and they're like all freaked out, you go to the emergency room. Emergency people are trained in trauma. They know they need to become calm. They have to be calm because the situation is intense. And if they're not calm, they're not going to be able to actually function properly. So in emergency rooms, everybody is taught how to be calm. So even sometimes we can calm a person or a child. It's like, oh my God, that sounds really intense. Let's just take a deep breath. Just like something as simple as that can just, it happened on Saturday for me because my daughters are in the catastrophe in Asheville where there's flooding and mudslides, and
Many deaths.
and they don't
Many
have
deaths.
water. And so I was like, they don't have water. I'm talking to my son. He's not in the trauma. They don't have water. They don't have this. What are they going to do? And he says, Mom, take a deep breath,
Hmm.
calm down. Okay, so we're going to see what is the best thing for them to do. It may not be the best thing for them to leave immediately because they may not be able to get gas and then they're in a worse situation. We're going to evaluate what's the best next step for them to take. But just that him telling me to take a breath calmed me down. And then I was like, okay, you're right. And then we could figure it out because when you're triggered like that, you usually don't think as logically as when you can just calm down for a minute. Let's look at this and look at the options.
So
So
part
that's,
of
yeah.
you mentioned shift our attitude and our thinking to be able to listen and validate others.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that listening would be to help just slow the pace down.
Yeah, just a
And as you
little bit.
mentioned, even if we don't have time, I like what you said, that just showing that concern.
Yeah.
I wish I had the time. perhaps like, maybe I can help you find the resources you need.
or refer you to somebody who can help you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. What else? What else can we do?
Well, of course, education, and I would like to bring in Karuna Care for sure. I mean, we have classes on grief, on feelings, on trauma, addiction, and complicated grief, and we're going to be developing a few other courses. But these classes really, I had a brahmachari, and he took the grief course, and one of his takeaways was, oh, somebody came to me in grief, and I realized that what I said to them, even though it was scripturally correct, was so insensitive. And he had that realization. I'm like, wow, if that's all he got out of the course, that was great. Because we don't realize how impactful our words are on someone who's like dealing with grief or trauma or addiction. And yeah, just being able to like be there and say, okay, what is this? Well, I don't know much about addiction. We have a bhakti recovery group, maybe that would be supportive of you, or, so being able to say, I don't know much about this, but what are the resources? And Karuna Care is one of them.
So part of the education is being aware that there is trauma, being aware of how it impacts people, being aware of how to not make things worse. And
Yeah.
and I mean, in the future, I would hope we get to the point where people in leadership roles in ISKCON, because we're a new organization, we're still building structures,
Yes.
but
Yes.
they get these kind of training, that new brahmachari after 2 months, when people know he's going to show some sense of being there for some time, maybe he needs some preliminary instruction on how to deal with traumatized people, at least a little bit, so he doesn't make it worse. And then he's informed who he should hand them off to, who's maybe more trained. And, in the future, every temple would have some really capable trained people, and that we would look to temple presidents and Sunday school teachers and whatever those
Yeah.
are, to make sure those people are
Yeah.
trained in aspects of obviously direct spiritual practice, but also in these other things that support a healthy life, physically,
Healthy.
mentally,
Yeah.
psychologically,
Yeah.
emotionally, for practice.
Healthy individuals and healthy communities. In a lot of other religious institutions, ministers get training in these kind of things. Now, our training is Bhakti Shastri, it's, memorizing the scripture. It's a lot of it is head,
Mm.
but by the way, Krishna is in our heart, and that's where we are. And also compassion is a big part of our tradition. And so, I think we need as much education of the heart as we need of the head, so that we can be a balanced support system for individuals. So, having people get training in feelings and grief and trauma and addiction, just to have an understanding, it's widespread, and it even affects people in our movement. So, we want to be able to be aware of it, rather than, you're not following the four regular principles. I can't believe that. You're just awful. And it's like, okay, that hurt. So, yeah.
So you're kind of speaking in a sense about the need to create a compassion and a shared
Yes. Yes.
environment. Is that another thing that leaders need to know to do?
Yeah. Yeah. How to create a compassionate environment. And that means also that the leader needs to be able to get taken care of too, because if the leader's too stressed, the leader needs compassion too. So do we have places that leaders can go to get compassionate care for themselves too? Or they just have to be tough and suck it up and just take more and more and more and more until they break or hurt somebody?
Well, it's interesting because it reminds me, I haven't seen in these letters recently, but I remember a few years ago, they seemed to be coming in every other week. Letters from oftentimes it was a sannyasi or a person in a very senior role who, by the nature of their commitment, had taken on a lot of stress and perhaps didn't have those kind of relationships or those kind of outlets that they needed to take a deep breath, calm down, be able to work, speak confidentially with someone. So we get these letters, dear devotees. Sometimes it was dear disciples.
Yeah.
I've done my best.
Yep.
I've reached the breaking point. I
Yep.
don't have anyone to talk to, and I wish you the best, but you won't be hearing from me.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
As opposed to, when we have to ask, like, well, clearly we were missing something as a community.
Yeah.
We didn't create that type of safe environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, this is another factor that sometimes I think Rabindra's Trooper, who did a whole series of
Did
discussions about
care of the
work
soul.
of
Care of the soul.
anti-poison and about kind of
Oh, oh.
the expectation that we would have to put too much pressure on ourselves. That we have this very high standard devotional service, and I mean I remember I was such a fool as a new devotee. I can remember I became a ISKCON devotee, moved into an ashram at the age of 20, just before my 21st birthday. And within a few months, from what I learned, I was kind of calculating where Lord Chaitanya took sannyas at 24. So that seems reasonable. I can make that a goal. You mentioned about, you thought you're going to be a pure devotee soon. And
Yeah.
here, both you
Yeah.
and I have been practicing Krishna consciousness for about 50 years. And
Yeah.
don't want to discourage anybody out there who's been just doing this
No.
three, who thinks they're going to be done in 10 years.
No.
It is a lifelong practice,
It is.
and involves real some internal work and transformation.
Yes, yes, yes. And really, everything we do out here, all the good things we do out here, building a temple, collecting a lot of money, all of that, we can't take that with us. But whatever we do to develop our subtle consciousness and our ability to be compassionate and understanding, all of that, you get benefits now. You reap benefits in your relationships now, and you get to take that with you. That internal work, you get to take that with you.
Well, also, I think, if someone sacrifices to build a beautiful temple for Krishna, certainly there's even scriptural references, that's going to benefit them in their future, that
It
they
will definitely benefit them. Maybe not exactly in the way they think. It may not make them a pure devotee. Yeah, that was the distinction. Sorry. It's not that external acts aren't good. They're not the goal.
Yeah, they're not the only. They're not the
Yeah,
only.
yeah, yeah. The only goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear so much from devotees that spend a lot of time with Srila Prabhupada, and we know the degree of tapasya and austerities and sacrifices and literally suffering that he underwent to prepare himself and then travel, and then, the last 11 years or so that he was physically with us, phenomenal. The external successes, thousands of disciples, 100 temples open, dozens of books translated and published, and big people that probably met and influenced, and huge external results. And at
Right.
the same time, oftentimes devotees will speak about the thing that really impacted them the most is Prabhupada's compassion,
Yes.
was genuine concern. I was just in New Vrindavan a couple of weeks ago, hearing what's there's quite a few famous stories of Prabhupada manifesting that compassion and concern for devotee, and making sure
Yes.
they had a chowder in the night air, and
Yes.
telling the local authorities, this is your job. This person is a Vaishnavi. She's not going to ask for her own benefit. So that softness of heart that Prabhupada had just proves to us, we should do the external things in Krishna consciousness, if you call it that. It's not the best term, but
Yeah.
the measurable things. Let's say the
Yes.
measurable things. But we have to continue to work on those most subtle things too.
And
So
also, Prabhupada's power came
let's
because he did a lot of an internal work on himself. He was the epitome of Krishna consciousness. He carried it with us, and he carried us with him, and then we thought, oh, we're Krishna conscious, and then he left and we realized, oh, I guess we're not.
Well, right in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, in Prabhupada's Purport, he talks about the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Prabhupada certainly was that.
Yeah.
What else about the environment? Let's say, we talked about confidentiality and the need to be able to express ourselves, the need to be able to hear from others, and accepting
Mm-hmm.
environment. anything more about that that leaders should be thinking about? Both leaders in the home and leaders in the temple.
Yes, yeah. Creating an environment where there's trustworthiness and transparency. So that would mean honesty and consistency. So if we want to just use an example of a family. So if there's a family and the father comes home and he happens to be an alcoholic, I'm just using this and one day he comes home and he has presents for you and he's playing with you and it's so great. And then the next day he comes home and he beats you. It's like, whoa, you never know what to expect. That's not consistent. And you can't trust your environment, and you can't even trust him when he's going to be nice to you, because tomorrow he may not be nice to you. So it really, making consistency and integrity, transparency, like, saying what you mean, like, I can count on you. You said you would do this and you're going to do this. You said I could have this, and you're going to follow through with that. You're not going to say, oh, I changed my mind, you can't have that anymore. There's a system of accountability and trustworthiness that I can depend on. It gives people safety and security, which trauma is the opposite of safety and security. It's anxiety and fear. So, yeah.
So we need to make sure as leaders, again, what is trauma, how it impacts, how people bring it with them, our own trauma that we carry, but also knowing that the environment that we create
Yes.
can in itself, for me, it's like, hey, I was in a hurry. It was Rath Yatra Day, so I screamed at a bunch of people to get things done. They simply need to understand, but I may not be understanding, of course, in one sense, is Vaishnava aparad. We know about that, but also I could be traumatized in this person. They're just a soft-hearted person that came to volunteer, and in my mind, I'm thinking they're just a body that's supposed to help, transfer the
Right.
prasadam,
Right.
or so I could be traumatizing people now.
And
I might want,
understanding.
and I can be re-traumatizing people.
Yes. So understanding our limitations is
Mhm.
really important. So for me, that's what helps me a lot. I have anxiety from when I was a baby. So I have anxiety and I get worked up sometimes.
In terms of others, an important thing I think I'm hearing you say, that means I need to be open as a leader to feedback. I
Yeah.
need that person to stop being able to say, you
Yeah.
just treated me in a very harsh way, and that wasn't a good thing. I need to be able to go, okay, whoa, I was just trying to get the Rath Yatra festival together. I didn't realize what I was doing. Thanks for that feedback. Not that
Right.
I'm in some kind of fight. Oh, you're saying I'm not a good person by
Right.
criticizing me.
Right.
Well, I am a good person, but no, I need to learn to do better. That feedback environment seems important.
And feedback, it's hard to receive because we may be, especially even men, may be traumatized by shame, like, don't do this, be strong, don't cry. And so it's like, if you are giving me feedback, I may, as a man or a leader, take that as a threat. My ego may be taking that as a threat, like, you're
I
threatening
didn't
me.
completely follow. Explain that more. How is it that stand up, be strong, and I don't want to be shamed? How does that directly connect? Explain that again.
Okay, all
My
right. So,
my male ego blocked what you were trying to tell me there.
sorry. So, like, if I'm shamed a lot as a child,
Okay.
it's like I'm traumatized. So I may grow up to be very defensive because I don't want to get that hurt again. That hurt so much. So now, if anybody says anything to me that I'm a bad person or I did it wrong or I wasn't good, if anybody says anything, it's hard for me to receive it because it feels like you're hurting me, because that's my trauma. And so then it's hard for me to take feedback because I feel like you're attacking me, which feels like a threat, which means I'm going to protect myself. So that's another part of knowing and understanding ourselves.
These can be very, very subtle things.
Very subtle, very
And
powerful.
I don't think I could just walk up to you and say, hey, Sukavaha, I noticed that you got really angry in that board meeting. That leads me to believe that when you were young, they didn't give you ice cream when you took your
No,
tonsils.
of
I mean,
course
I
not.
don't see those things. I just see the Sukavaha blew
Yeah,
up in the board meeting, and wow, did you mess up our progress that
yeah.
day?
And you could say, instead of saying, what's wrong with you? You messed up our progress. You might say, what happened? What happened to you in the middle of the meeting that you got so upset? That was kind of surprising to me. So again, that's that changing that thought, like, what's wrong with you? You messed up our plan, to like, what just happened here? That one thing, that's a big thing, actually.
And as leaders, what I'm learning, among many things I'm learning here today, we need to create an environment where that's welcomed, it's accepted, it's understood. We need it. It's like in a hospital, it's kind of like understood you're going to need to have your blood pressure taken and you may need some medication and you need a nurse who's going to say, how you feeling today? It's not a sign of weakness to have the nurse say, how you feeling today? And it's not a sign of weakness to say, I think I may need some help on this one. But to
Right,
create that environment where if Sukavaha says to me, says to Nutama, what happened here? I don't get my bristles up, as they say. Who are you to ask me? But that I welcome that. It's like, wow, what did happen here?
right, right. And that's the antidote to judgment. Curiosity.
Hmm.
Curiosity, like, oh, Krishna, I didn't expect that person to say that. I didn't expect that, like, what is that? Where did that, what's that from? What am I supposed to learn from that?
So
Like,
before we judge, and this is related and maybe not directly, but in part, before we judge, to be asking why.
well, and you have to be careful of the why word, because, like,
Okay.
why did you get so upset? Like, that also feels like judgment.
Okay.
What happened? What's going on?
What's going on for you?
My kids are in Asheville. I don't know if they're gonna live. I mean, oh, it could be that. You
Yeah.
know, we don't know what's going on inside a person's house. My husband just said he was wanted to divorce me. It's like, oh, whoa,
I
okay,
just lost my job. My
yeah,
kids, I
anything.
found out, are on
I'm
drugs.
I'm dealing. I've just found out I might have cancer. Who knows what's going on? We don't
I was
know.
driving home and some guy smashed into me on the way home. My
Yeah,
mother's in Nepal and, she's
I
got
didn't
a heart
sleep
attack.
last night. I'm tired.
Yeah.
Those things. What happened? Be curious, not like, why are you acting like that? Because that also still feels like a judgment. Like, you shouldn't be acting like that. What happened? What's going on? Being curious, like, what's going on?
This is
What
what they
happened?
call creating a loving community.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a
A
big
community
thing.
of bhakti.
Yeah.
Yeah. And bhakti doesn't necessarily mean we're all, like this minister said, doesn't mean we're all saints.
Nope.
I
Most
think
of us are in the hospital.
there's an expression that Christians talk about how we're all broken.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some sense of that, and that,
Uh,
but we know, our theology teaches us that we are actually whole with WHOLE.
whole and complete.
We are whole and complete. We are parts and parcels of Krishna. We are divine energy. This is a temporary covering, but the human form of life is meant to get out of it.
Yeah.
Part of it means we need, as leaders and as devotees, we need to be trauma informed because it's
Yes.
one of the
Yes.
complexity that faces us, especially in this age.
I'm
We're
just
almost
aware of
out
the
of,
time. And I
yes,
just we want to make sure that we complete all the thoughts.
please. I was going to just ask you if there's any other kind of concluding thoughts or concepts.
Yeah, well, another thing that creates trauma is that sometimes the power differential. Like, I'm up here and you're down here, just do what you're told. And that's how it was for me for the first 27 years. So really creating collaborative mutuality, really helping people to find their voice, empowering them to speak, like you said, giving them a chance to give feedback. 360 feedback is very powerful. If you can put that in your temple, you can actually get information and prevent problems from this 360 feedback. But we're afraid of feedback. For a kshatriya, dishonor is worse than death. So don't tell me I did something wrong. but as devotees, we can welcome, oh, how can we do this in a way that works for everybody? Not that I did something wrong, but how could we improve? you know, even great basketball players, they look at how they can improve. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but how can I improve? Oh yeah, I can tweak that.
Well, it reminds me, I don't know a lot about it, but the little I know, like with a 12-step program, whether it's for drugs or sex
Yeah,
addiction or gambling or
yeah.
whatever, it always has to start with the point of, I need help.
Yes,
So I
yes,
think their
yes,
first principle is recognizing
yes.
whatever that power is, and we understand it's Krishna. I really need your help on this. I cannot do it on my own. I need work. I'm broken in this material world. I'm a spirit soul in the material world.
Right. And and the and we don't want to have to wait till everybody gets rock bottom. We want to be able to be trauma informed in the
Which is
middle
what
because
the 12-step program,
yeah,
oftentimes
no,
you say
I
you
yeah.
can't really get help unless you acknowledge you're at the bottom. So you're saying in Christian conscious, let's not go there.
Let's not go all the way rock bottom. Let's start learning in the middle. And then, we will have our rock bottom places, but we don't have everybody to be rock bottom and leave ISKCON and create more problems. So that's one thing. And yeah, helping people to get their voice. And then also understanding cultural, historical, racial, gender, caste issues. They play a part because there's a lot of generational trauma. There's a lot of women trauma. Women have been marginalized for centuries. Women didn't get to vote until I think it was 1923, like 100 years ago.
In America, yes.
Yeah, in America, they didn't get to vote. So like understanding these issues is important because women, people of color, they may have more generational and what's the other word? I can't remember the word, but anyway, more generational trauma that's passed down. Yeah, all of that. So understanding that, and then again, like you said, asking for support, and then being able to provide that support, giving people resources, referring people, referring them, and having those resources, having lists right in our office. Okay, here's this person, just like, oh, your tooth hurts. Here's a dentist, or you're having some, you're feeling really anxious or depressed. Let's get you some help in that.
So resources are important.
Yes.
What resources can we leave? Can we share with the devotees that may be listening to this?
Well, you would want to get local resources for sure for mental health facilities. Karuna Care
There's a
is a
percentage
resource.
of people that come to our temples are going to need professional
They will.
psychological help.
They
Why
will.
don't you just acknowledge that?
They
Just
will.
like a percentage of people come with different types of disabilities.
Yeah.
And we need to be prepared to have a place for people in wheelchairs to come up the sidewalk.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean they're not spirit soul, doesn't mean they're not lovely, need to be loved human beings, but that's just the nature of this world. So same
Right.
thing with
Right.
trauma,
Right.
psychological issues that may be there, more
Right.
serious
Yeah.
emotional needs.
So
Okay,
just, gathering those resources, even having a person doing gathering the resources, and there are different modalities that, I mean, EMDR for trauma, EFT is emotional freedom technique, tapping, that's a resource, breath work, even
those are agencies. I didn't recognize those.
those are modalities of healing. EFT.
But now, as a temple president or a Sunday school teacher, I'm not expected to learn all those things.
No, you can say, look that up online. See if you can find somebody who does that.
Okay.
Pranayam is very helpful, breathing, those are some simple things. And then, maybe you want to get, see if there's somebody that can do EMDR. EMDR is eye movement desensitization. I forget what the R is.
So we're not going to talk about teaching devotees these, at least
No, just,
but to know that there's help.
Yes.
And that you don't have to fake it.
Yes. Yes.
You can share.
I want to help you. Let me see if I can find some resources for you. And it does say that people who are in an environment that feels safe and protective they produce better, their job satisfaction is better, they're much more committed to the cause, the relationships and the exchanges are more cordial. Like these, can produce an environment and a community that's vibrant and supportive and happy, than just stressed and anxious and frustrated. So yeah, we want to really be able to create that environment, and being trauma informed helps us to create that environment.
This has been very, very informative. I know I learned a lot of things. I'll be honest, I learned more things than I thought I would. You raised a lot of questions when you talk about looking at our own trauma. And I can see that looking at our own trauma, things that maybe happened in the past, we're not saying, hey, dwell in what happened in the past, become,
Not at all.
self-absorbed. Don't
Not
try
at
to
all.
push on the mission or preach or, just wallow in my pain. Not at all. What we're talking about is understanding we have a material body, we have a material mind, we bring different experiences into it. And by understanding those things, we can be better devotees, more peaceful devotees, better able to relate with other devotees, better able to create a safe and loving environment with others we serve with.
Yes.
By understanding this.
Yes, it makes it better all the way around, individually, collectively, and even for the larger ISKCON. Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. I had so much fun being with you. I feel so.
Trauma-informed leadership in ISKCON. I think it's a good thing. And thank you and Karuna Care for all the good work that you're doing. And someone listens to this program, where should they go if they just want more information? Specifically Karuna Care?
karunacare.iscon.org. We have a website now. We're just ending up the programs for this year, and we're developing a lot of more programs for next year. But there may be a grief support group that's available still this year. There is, I think, I don't know, I think it might have started already. There's
So say the website one more time.
Karunacare.
K-A-R, sorry, we don't have those little things underneath.
KARUNACARE. karunacare.iscon.org. O-R-G.
karunacare.iscon.org. Okay.
Yeah.
And if they want other information, of course, this is the day of the internet, right? You can look up trauma. I'm sure there's unlimited courses online, and
unlimited.
perhaps, if you have more interest, you can look up some local resources with social welfare and things like that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Prabhupada said, right, he built a house, or I heard recently, maybe better described, a home in which everyone can live.
Home, yes.
And
home always means care, comfort, security, compassion, love. It feels safe. Yeah. So how can we make everyone?
We're all trying to go home, back to Godhead, right?
Go home to the other home. Thank you so much.
Jai Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.